Hey everybody, it's Andrea Pocket, president and co-founder of Stigma-Free Mental Health Society. And I am so happy to welcome you to our Stigma-Free Voices podcast that is featured on Spotify and on our website as well. So I just wanted to give a warm welcome to our friend Melanie. Hey Melanie, I want you to say hi and let us know where you're tuning in from.
I'm in Toronto. Well, I'm actually not in Toronto, Canada anymore. Now I'm outside of Toronto in a little town called Norfolk, which is for people who kind of know, it's closer to Hamilton, closer to Brantford, but yeah, I'll just say Norfolk right here.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've heard of it actually. We do a lot of work in rural communities, remote communities. So I think that's a smaller one, right?
it's very small. Yes, it is small and cute. It's where I met my husband, and I
Oh,
love it here. Yeah.
amazing. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk to you today to find out about your passions, your work, currently your education and everything. So I'll just jump right in, read your bio, and then we'll jump into some questions. Does that sound all right?
That's great.
Okay, perfect. So, Melanie Goldman is a registered psychotherapist and the founder of Mind Over Borderline Clinic, a clinic that specializes in support for individuals with borderline personality disorder and their families. She's an advocate, speaker, writer, musician, and a spiritual guide. She has spent more than a decade championing the BPD community through peer facilitation, formal training with organizations like Emotions Matter, and her role as a cast member of the BPD Bunch. YouTube series. I got to check that out. I love it. Melanie's approach is all rounded and it's personalized, integrating evidence based therapies with wisdom gained from diverse mentors and holistic practices worldwide. Melanie regularly speaks to audiences around the globe. She raises awareness, she reduces stigma, and inspires hope. Inspired by her grandmother, Rae, who had bipolar disorder and likely BPD, Melanie is committed to helping everyone find their own ray of light in the darkness. That's amazing. And Rae is spelled Rae. So, welcome. I think you have some news. You just made a reached a huge milestone in your life. So, do you want to share what that was like for you and share with our audience what it is?
Oh, what we were just talking about with passing
Yeah.
the exam. Oh, yeah, because I was telling you, like Andrew was just asking me because funny enough, while we were getting together to make this episode, there was, brackets that said, what is RPQ? And I said, well, I was able to drop the Q. And for anybody who is even qualifying, what that means is we study for these awful, awful exams. And I went into my dungeon, and even under the CRPO, which is the Canadian Registers of Psychotherapists of Ontario, we have to like do these grueling exams. And for me, I was able to get accessibility, but either way, I was sitting with
Mhm.
like two people staring at me while I was doing this like 4-hour exam. And you
Wow.
have 3 times to pass it. But when I tell you a lot of people poo 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 don't. I pray for everybody doing these types. It's like, when you do the bars, you do these types of exams. When
Yeah.
we signed up to do this, it said qualifying and I passed it, but I was just like, didn't know because the exams aren't a measure whether you're a good therapist. These
Yeah.
exams are kind of set up like when you do these SATs, when you like they're very weird. Like they're
Yeah.
not, yeah. So
So you're a
I
registered
guess
psychotherapist now, though, which is great,
I
right?
am. I am. So I'm able to
Amazing.
continue being a therapist, yes, and still
So
help
proud of
people.
you. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah.
Okay. So let's dig into your personal story. You have a very inspirational story. I know a lot about it, but our viewers may not. So I just wanted to start out in the beginning, like looking back, what were some of the first signs or feelings that something deeper was going on for you, perhaps in high school or earlier?
Yeah, I mean, something I talk about, I think that my sensitivity has always been there. One of my first recollections, and again, I talk about kind of dissociative amnesia throughout a lot of people with trauma, regardless of BPD. We all have these blips of amnesia, but the memories are clear. So I'll remind you that some of my earliest memories aren't there, but my memories of always being so sensitive to the point where my empathy overload has never gone away, where I could just feel energy. So even in a classroom when I was in grade 3, I felt this boy who was very, very, very different. And I don't need to put a label on him. He would sit in the corner of the class, and I would go out of my way to go sit by him and try to talk to him, try to make him feel better. And that was just one little scenario. But I knew in my heart, I was also kind of feeling that energy to a very different level. And there's been many circumstances in my life similar to where either intuitively I felt something was wrong with someone I didn't know, or I would go out of my way many times, whether it was high school, even now, where I will go over to people I don't know and be like, what's wrong? And they'll be like, how do you know? And I'm just no. So I think this ultra sensitivity we talk about as well in the BPD communities, it's that catch-22. It's a superpower, and it can be something where we just don't know how to turn it off, the volume level of it. So yeah, that's something I had to learn, that has always been there, but I now look at it as a blessing.
Yes. Well, it's wonderful that you're able to feel empathy and understand that we all go through the human experience. We all struggle and suffer. And I see it as a gift, definitely, as well. But I could, as we talk further, maybe, sharing why was it a detriment as well? Like, that's something to consider, right?
Great question. So when you think about the world isn't always friendly. And I mean this with so much love to people who are figuring out what healing means. And so when your heart is open, one of my favorite expressions I always say, he's passed away now, his name is Ram Dass, but he always talks about, can you keep your heart open in hell? And what he metaphorically means is, if you can walk through the world and not personalize how everybody is kind of projecting their own version of reality, can you keep your heart open in hell, where can you still keep your heart open after everybody is walking around with their own daggers? And so if you're a sensitive, empathetic person, sometimes you're going like this and you're wanting everybody to hug you back or have your same heart, but not everybody has that same ability to love like you do. So many times in my life, I'm like, but why? Why don't they love like I do? Why am I always left with my heart broken? Why am I always left like fearing abandonment, fearing safety, fearing love? And the truth is, that's the catch-22, that there are people that can love you to that same level, but the people that don't know how, or they're still figuring it out, it's not necessarily their fault. And if you start to resent it because you've given so much, that's also your healing too. So you need to learn boundaries, you need to learn filters, you need to learn that it is great, you have a beautiful heart, but you need to give it at that barometer level. So I had to learn, yes, Mel, it's beautiful, you're so loving, and rainbows and unicorns, because that's me at a level barometer of 100 some days. But the world is not at that barometer. And so if you give out energy, to every single person, is every person going to be able to give that back to you the same way? And so many of that I've had to learn about ego and savior complex, and not everybody has the same heart as you. And with half an hour, I could go on spiritual lessons and existential complexes, conversations that go out to the universe and beyond. And you and me remember our first talk, we were just went on and on, but I don't want to do that. So for the sake, sensitivity with measurement, when I teach my clients too, with boundaries, with understanding of your heart, with understanding of unhealed wounds where people walk around, learn. We have to learn as individuals with big sensitivity and hearts.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, teachers and friends, parents, like different kinds of people in different roles. And so say for a teacher, and we're talking about emotional intensity like you are and sensitivity, what do you wish they knew, like back then, perhaps when you went to high school? or what teachers can learn from that, those lessons that you're talking about and the reality?
Definitely. And I loved this question. Like, I remember looking at this question and being like, this is such an important question. I think that teachers actually are some of the most important people that we actually look at, and some people can understand how important. You have the ability as a teacher to make sure that a kid can feel safe. So I had some teachers not understand that calling a child out in front of other kids, if just say they have accessibility problems or they're not understanding something, is so unsafe for that kid. So if you're a really beautiful teacher and a kid is struggling, can you take the time, even 5 minutes, to approach them in a very safe way? And again, joking is not funny if that kid is embarrassed with their disability. And a lot of kids have issues where they play it off. And so it's not your job per se to go over and above, but there are teachers that can see these things and can kind of mark that. So I think as a teacher, if you can kind of, I wouldn't say intuitively notice, but see in your class if you love your students, because I know some teachers that they went out of their way, ironically, to do the opposite for me. And they would point me out in front, right? So loudness doesn't always mean you're loud. It might mean that you're in pain. If you're quiet, it actually might as well mean you're in pain. So maybe you don't need to call somebody out. Maybe you might pull them aside, ask them, right? If they don't want to talk, maybe you ask the parent what's going on. So like I wrote one more thing so I don't forget, but I think that's what I wrote for teachers. Um, Discipline in front of peers, no. Private converse and integrate learning environments for some students, maybe asking them privately what would help them. So again, I think the public call out versus the private isolation was always something that stood out for me. That's for me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very wise, and I completely understand where you're coming from as well. And just touching on another area. So, what about parents? How does this affect them, and how can they understand that emotional intensity or sensitivity? What do you think?
Okay, so I didn't want to screw this up because of my own ADHD. So I wrote some bullet points for parents.
Yeah.
I think parents can recognize patterns and they don't know. So I work as well behaviorally and I can recognize individually within my clients patterns. So what I mean by patterns is repeated extreme reactions. So for example, a child might have the same reaction over time. So it's not just a bad day, right? Because sometimes a kid might say the same thing like, I'm worthless, nobody cares. Um, I sat alone. I sat alone. So like sometimes just noticing the same pattern over time. So for a parent, it's not always about hovering or doing more or asking more. It's literally just about noticing. So becoming more about noticing the little things is actually very important. Another thing I want them to know is it's actually about the intensity of the emotion. So not just the behavior. So for me, big reactions are often nervous system overload, not defiance. So a lot of parents, especially growing up and now with BPD, if we took BPD, if we're sad, we might be sad at a 10, right? Not a 5. So we might be like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, my kid is slamming doors, right? So pattern, the amount. Are we going to take it personally? Or are we going to notice how intense it is? So that's another thing they
Mhm.
can notice, the intensity.
Yeah.
Another thing, this one I think is the most important one and the hardest one. Again, I'm not a parent, so I always step back and say, I know I'm not a parent. Balance involvement with hovering. Okay, so hovering being, and I don't want the parents to
The
be upset with
helicopter
me, but
parent, right?
yes, exactly. So how do we want to do this? Support without surveillance. So our kid isn't our best friend. I understand that. We still want to be the parent, but we don't want to be controlling. We want to be curious. So can we ask open-ended questions so our kid feels safe? kind of similar to the teacher, because we want it, not teacher isn't the parent, but we want the kid to feel like they can open, there's an open door, right? That the kid
Yeah.
can feel safe, because there's so much shame. What if the kid's being bullied? What if the kid doesn't want to talk about the fact they think they might be depressed, or they don't like their body, or they're not safe in their home with you, or they heard something? Who knows what's really happening at home? Um, so extreme hovering can increase anxiety too, and reduce the independence. So parents are always trying to, and I know because I've dealt with them, figure out, what did I do wrong, or what can I do more of? No, it's not more, more, more. Can you just be present and understand that the kid is not feeling seen? It's hard just being a kid. So we're not hovering, we're just getting curious.
Yeah.
Half the battle, even with a therapist, is understanding we're meeting a client where they're at. And for me, and this is, again, everything I say is an opinion. So everything I'm saying in this is an opinion. If I come to a session and I'm telling a client what to do, all of a sudden, especially with BPD, that client's going, I'm not feeling safe, right? So with a parent, if I was saying your child, but say your student, your child is going, I don't know how to navigate this world. The parent is also collaborating with their child and going, you know what? I've had trouble there too. We're meeting our kid, right? Not do this, do that. And your kid's going, oh my gosh, where do I go from here? So,
Yeah.
right. And the next part, really, I just said, is create safe emotional check-ins. So the check-in isn't hovering, it's saying, um, what was hard today? Right? What did you do that was good? Like these check-ins are open, like I said, so the kid might feel comfortable to then come in and move through. Is that enough? Because I have more, I just don't want to.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think it's learning about the emotional health and meeting our kids where they're at. And that's what I'm really getting from what you're saying. And I was wondering too, just want to dig a little deeper into some of the questions that are really flowing here. And I was wondering about the conversation specifically around borderline personality disorder today.
Yeah.
And how can we change that conversations with kids, teens, and parents alike? How do we approach it? And I just am so curious of your insight on this because of your own personal experience.
Um, so identity language, right? I talked about, I was going to say that just now. So a lot of the language around it is misunderstood. So if a parent is also feeling embarrassed, it might be something that they read, and then that gets projected onto the kid. So let me explain what I mean. Even if it's
Yeah.
a therapist, or right, even one of the questions it asks about diagnosis earlier on, whether that's a good idea or not. Everything is, like I said, filtered through the experience of an individual who you talk to. So just say that parent goes to another parent, the parent goes, oh my God, my kid's going through this. Every conversation is based on what that person's dealt with. How do we change conversations around stigma? We have to back up and look at things through not judging, not
Mhm.
getting more curious and understanding through education, looking at examples of modeling, looking at examples of the world of bravery. And what I mean by that is a lot of parents go and look through the world, and this isn't a judgment, through fear. Maybe they had something they read. Maybe they're scared because their kid is showing signs of something and they're in this fear-based, momentum. Like, this isn't what I want. I'm going to push this away. It must be ADHD. It's got to be this. Somebody told me it might be this. At the end of the day, life is what you make of it. And if you can find a map and you can find the ways to fix it, and anything is fixable in a sense, we have to change the conversation of how we all look at it individually. We're all different. Every family, every situation. And so every conversation like this is changing it. And so there's so many parents running around, look, there's one answer. BPT is the only way to do BPD. No. Uh, my therapist said that 10% of people with BPD die by suicide. No. So it might be a statistic, but is everybody a statistic? No. So the way that conversations and stigma gets changed is actually through active conversations like this, modeling good people out there that are therapists with BPD, doing great things out in the world. And so I meet with parents every day, and every single one of their kids is extremely different than the next.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to eradicate stigma. What I'm really trying to say is there's no one size fits all, and there never will be in life. And yes, it's extremely hard for the first few years of the diagnosis, but it's not after, and it gets easier and easier. And that's actually what research shows. So what
Yeah.
parents need to understand is the education, is the research, is that there are treatments, is that the sooner they get their child help and they help their kid, but not like we made some good suggestions, and their kid starts to understand they're not alone, there are people out there, then we can actually start moving the nozzle in the right direction instead of just adding more fuel to the fire and going on the internet and being like, people are so this, people are so that,
Yeah,
right? Sorry, I
exactly.
answer your question in circles, but
No, no, it's wonderful. I think at Stigma-Free, we always talk about awareness, understanding, and acceptance. And I'm really hearing those themes. And I was curious, like, we have a conversation, we identify the problem, but what can we do? What's one thing that we can do, parents, for example, to create safety and connection with their team? Is there anything else, that one simple tool or something that they can apply?
I really would stress like because it depends on the context of where they're at,
Mhm.
right? So, like I said, for example, the emotional check-ins are really important. So I think the safety, and so I don't know if watching the language and the environment, because everybody picks up energy. So for example, if it's a really hostile environment, I think parents have to understand that we pick up everything, right? So the body picks up everything. The child picks up language. So whether we like it or not, your kid's going to start saying the F word and S word like shit and all these things. Sorry, I just said it. So what parents have to do is start to understand they're modeling a better future for their kid.
Yeah.
And I always say we don't blame, we understand to all my clients. Because the big joke is that a lot of people come into therapists and they say, well, my parents did this to me, right? And I always say, nobody did anything to you. We don't blame, we understand. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is we always have to understand, even looking back to move forward. But what I want parents to understand is we're still modeling everything towards the children. We're still walking examples in the world. So, for example, if you want to have a conversation with your partner, your energy is still everywhere, all over the environment. It's absorbed, it's transmuted. Your example to your kid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it means so, it's so meaningful. And I think I know having you here today has helped many people to look through your lens of being understanding and getting that we need to meet people where they're at. And I look at my parents, I forgive them in all respects, but it took me to understand that they did the best with what they had. I know it may sound cliche, but I think it's true. Yeah.
But that's just the thing. And again, if we look at a lot of people who are walking around, it's very hard because they they hold on to this pain of not looking at it like that. I don't think that that's cliche, what you just said. I think it's actually very important to look at people as doing the best that they can because it circles back to the very first thing we spoke about here. When we don't look at people as doing the best that they can, what we do is we break them down to judgment and we break them down to actually our own insecurity. What you show when you do that is your own healing. If I judged my dad today the same way I did in the beginning of my healing journey, it's my own unforgiveness. I've released my own soul as doing that. And now my relationship with my dad is he's one of my best friends. And it's beyond me. I used to have so much anger in my soul. And I call him and we laugh and we FaceTime and we joke about how our faces together. But a lot of people can't be there right now, or they might even be upset for me saying that. And I understand because that's where they're at. And it's their judgment and the pain and the yelling and the that wasn't it. That wasn't the childhoods. And so when I think about the kids right now and their households and the anger in some of these households, remember we just said, what can a parent do? Work on yourself, work on your anger, work on what's going on for your, not just you, for your kid, for everybody, for your generation, for the generations after, because that's what your kids, you owe your kid that too. You know what I mean? Your kid looks
Yeah.
up to you, whether you know it or not. And I think that that's the same theme with teachers, with parents, with friends, all of us. That's the love that we can keep giving each other with no judgment, with compassion.
Yeah. So what's a message that you would like to share with parents, kids, teens, whoever you feel in your heart? Is there any kind of message you can give them?
Yeah, you know what? When I saw this one, I think now one is that it goes ties with another thing we were speaking about. It's when you're highly sensitive, and I have not yet met a person with BPD and young teens, a lot of them, when you're figuring out who you are, or if you're dealing with bullying, or figuring out your body, or figuring out all this stuff, I think it's really important that you understand in the end, the stuff you can't give yourself, if you give it away first, you're always going to need it back. Meaning, try to figure out how you can love yourself or even accept yourself first, because that is it isn't cliche, because you're always going to be going out into the world asking everybody to accept you. And that's never going to feel okay. You're always going to be like endlessly looking at everybody to accept you. And trust me, whether they do or they don't, if you can't accept yourself first, it's never going to feel okay. And with abandonment and rejection and emptiness and all the symptoms that we deal with BPD, when you start to learn you are lovable, you are okay, you're not alone, and nothing's wrong with you. Nothing. All of these symptoms actually add to you. I swear they add to you. They make you just as special as everybody else. If anything, you can work with them and work through them and add them to your toolbox and become the most special person that you could be in the world. It becomes this thing where you start to be like, I am great. I've just been second guessing myself this entire time. So I think for me, it's start to notice all those things that you judge yourself for and use them, and get curious, like we were talking about, who you are versus putting everybody else first.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And I know we didn't talk too much about the diagnosis and the meaning and all of the knowledge around borderline personality disorder. I wanted to focus more on the story and the message, and we did that beautifully. And I was wondering if people wanted to learn more about borderline, and also where could they find you?
So I have my website, so www.mindoverborderline.ca. And you can find me, and soon I'll actually be sharing like resources. I'm working on this long resource list and I'll put your website and more resources that I'm working on. And there's stuff with the BPD Bunch and other resources on there already, and other podcasts I'll be on. I'll add this one. And as well as they can learn about me there as well, and my services. And yeah, I don't love to, my services and that stuff, but
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
I know. I know. But yeah, but tons of stuff's out there. And
Yeah, that's perfect. I absolutely love it because, people are curious. You sometimes hear the term borderline personality disorder, right? And it has this stigma a lot of the time. So I feel like, arming people with knowledge and creating that awareness, you're doing an amazing job. And you're not just creating awareness, you're taking action and making a huge impact in the world. So thank you so much for coming here today.
you're the best. Thank you, Andrea.
All right. So we're here with Melanie Goldman today talking about her passions, borderline personality disorder, and where to find more information, tips for parents, how to help young people with their emotional regulation. So here we are on Stigma-Free Voices. If you are watching on Facebook Live or on LinkedIn, and if you find this afterwards, please give us a share. And Melanie, stay on the line. I'd love to say goodbye to you personally after the podcast. And I hope everybody has a stigma-free day. We really appreciate our community. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Take care.